So now here I am. I'm in Washington, D.C., and I'm waiting for answers from Congress. So what happens is that whenever a bill is passed, you have a version of the bill passed in the House, you have a version of the same bill passed in the Senate. Very seldom are they the same bill. These two houses will just make changes, if nothing if only it might be just to prove their own individuality. But in my case, it was a big difference, a huge difference. In the House version, there was no money, period, for billboards. They proposed a study, a commission study to come and study the bill. Well, they've had the bill for all these many years. Now they want to study it for 2 more years. That was what 3M's proposal was to the House of Representatives. Study the bill. Study it. Study it. Don't do anything hasty by taking down signs. That passed the House. The Senate passed it exactly what I wanted. Provisions for what the President of the United States and the administration set forth, John A. Volpe, etc. And that was, we're going to start taking down billboards and we're going to open that trust fund. And we're going to do that. So it was a deadlock. So they started to meet in conference. How it works is that the majority leader of the Senate chooses, in this case, because it was a big bill, the Federal Aid Highway Act. That's a lot of money, all kinds of aspects. 9 conferees, 5 Democrats, 4 Republicans. The House, the same thing, 5 and 4. But they're apart on one thing, that breaking that trust fund to pay for taking down billboards. Well, the truth of the matter is that the House is going to win this one. Because all they got to do is hold out. Because they know that the President of the United States is not going to veto that bill, that huge, massive bill, over one little tiny sliver of $150 million to be able to take down signs. Well, that's not going to happen. So, but what can I do about it? When conferees meet, you don't talk to them. They don't talk to the press. They don't talk. They're sworn to secrecy, so they can negotiate without pressure. They can just come together and work it out between themselves, between the House and the Senate. You don't talk to them. So my hands are tied. Volpe can't talk to him. No one can talk to him. Unless they phone and ask someone for information or something like that, where they all agree that that phone call would be reasonable, then that's different. But that's about it. So no one knows what's going on. Everyone's guessing at best. Now, I am getting very, very nervous. And my gut tells me I'm going to lose. Volpe says we're going to win. It sounds good, but I don't believe it. Now, I'm going to agree with him. Oh, I'm so glad to hear that. Yes, and and I'm positive as, to encourage him, but I don't believe it. And so the question became, to me anyway, there's a quotation that goes, an American proverb, a political proverb, if you can't lick them, join them. But there's a Scottish proverb, and that is, better bend than break. Better bend than break. And I got thinking, about the latter one. Better bend than break. So ask myself, what can I live without? Well, rather than to answer that one, I says, well, what do I have to have? What do I actually have to have? Well, I got to have just compensation for the billboards. I can't give up my right under the Constitution. But I've been representing these sign companies in the state of Utah. And they've supported me. Not with money, but just to go along with me. And it gave me more of a standing in Washington. So I got to stick out my neck. If you're going to cut my head off, it will be because of the sign companies, not because of me. It's got to be the combination. We got to stick together. So I'm not going to give up that I would fight for them as if I were fighting for myself. And I stuck with that approach all the way. Now, I'm thinking of a compromise now. So I ask myself, what will 3M and some other big sign companies not give in to? They're not going to give in to that study, that commission study. They're not going to give in to that because the house is sold on that. So the question becomes, how can we bring this together? And I said to myself, I believe, and if push comes to shove, if a compromise comes about, that are you, Doug, willing to let the big sign companies have their study commission? I said, yes. If there's enough money and a program set forth where we can start taking down signs with small sign companies. So this is the way it would have to work. Number one is that the states that acted first to implement the federal law, keep in mind, the federal law is not between me and the federal government. It's between the federal government and the states. Then it's between the states and me. I have a contract with the state of Utah. The state of Utah will pay me. They'll pay me after they get the money from the federal government. That's how it works. So I said to myself, if they will fund, and that they do it on the basis of the states that come forward first and get a local state law passed to implement the federal mandate, they get the money. And so it's just who's first, who's second, who's third, and so on, away you go. Well, I got billboards in 13 states. But I could survive just on Utah, frankly, if worse comes to shove, and I can wait for these other states. But in the meantime, I said to myself, what I'll do is once that federal law is passed, is I'm going to go to these states, and I'm going to start working to get these states to get a federal law passed within the 13 states where I had signed. I'm not going to sit around and hope for the best. I'm going to cause things to happen. All right. So anyway, will again. It's acting, on your free agency, to act upon an agency in action, in other words. And I'm going to exercise all the willpower I got. So once that federal law is passed, I'm not home free, far from it. I got to now go to all these states And those states are going to have to receive the money, and then they're going to have to appraise the signs. But if I get to the state and say, listen, if I'm willing to help you in getting your federal bill passed, I think you ought to consider me and take my signs down first. That was in the back of my mind. That's what I'm going to do. Put me first because I'm doing more to get the bill passed within your state. Now, if they don't pass a bill, the federal government's going to hold back federal funding, 10% on highways. The states are going to pass the bill. They're going to scream and holler and everything else, but they're going to pass the bill because they'll have to contribute part of the money to pay for the signs. It's not going to all be federal government. It doesn't work that way. They'll have their share, probably about 10%. So anyway, the time is going by, and I'm thinking, how do I approach this grand compromise? Well, the key two senators happened to be Sherman from Kentucky and Baker from Tennessee. Those two, John Sherman Cooper. It's actually John Sherman Cooper from Kentucky and Howard Baker from Tennessee. Well, if I go to John Sherman Cooper, this will be a mistake because he's holding out. He's not going to budge. Baker's a different ballgame. He's more political than Cooper. Cooper believes in ideology. But Cooper is the right man, and he has a seniority, and he's in that power position. But he might be willing to listen to a compromise. But I got to wait till September goes by. October goes by. Now we're into November. The pressure, articles in the paper, on and on we go. What is going to happen? I don't know for sure. But I've got this feeling within me, without that compromise, that it will go totally against me. So something is better than nothing. That was my thinking. For myself as well as these sign companies, small sign companies. Well, who can I talk to? Talk to Volpe? No way. Because then he'll let up. I want him just to keep pounding. I can't talk to anyone in the White House. I can't talk to anyone in government, period, about this. But I got to wait for the right moment and the right person. So I concluded that right person is not Howard Baker himself. It's Howard Baker Jr. himself. It is his chief of staff I've got to talk to. Now, they all know who I am. There's no problem with that. Been in so many articles written, and I'm part of their conversation. Goes on and on and on. I knew that. And I've been on television, and I'd been in the radio stations and the whole bit. Well, so we get now into the middle of November. I'm getting antsy, very, very much so. I mean, I wonder if I'm waiting too long. I can't go too early. What am I going to do? How should I go about this? Only two people I could talk to. One was Kate Ains, which I have referenced to you earlier. He was critical. He thought it was brilliant. Then I could talk to Jack Francis. Now, he's back there. He's the czar over all of highway beautification. Well, if the House of Representatives prevails, there'll be no money for highway beautification, and he'll have a job with nothing to do, and they're paying him a pretty good salary. He's really come a long ways, but what's he going to do? So I can talk to Jack in total confidence to see what he thinks, because he is very concerned and interested in getting that law through. That's his job, is at stake. And I trust him implicitly. I trust Jack with my life. He was just an amazing person. Good Mormon kid from southern Alberta. What I did was I decided to take the chief of staff to lunch of Howard Baker. And I talked to him along the lines that we cannot give up. We have got to hang tough. There is no way we can quit. We've got to not give in to the House. We must remain firm. That was the position I took during that period of enjoying a pretty expensive lunch. After all of that, I said, you know what I'm afraid of? I'm afraid they're going to compromise. I'm afraid of it. Well, how could they compromise? Well, it's quite simple. They could satisfy the big sign companies, real easy, with a study, a 2-year study. That's worthless, meaningless, and name it. Think about President Obama. The big issue of the debt. So they get an expensive commission set up. They get some of the most talented people in the country, former senators and former congressmen, and they had staff under them to do a complete study of how we can eliminate or start the process of reducing our debt. And both Republicans and Democrats, and the Democrats were in control. What happened? After 2 years, they issued their report. And here's how we can do it. Here's how we can bring our country in balance, our budget in balance. Here's how we can do it. And here's how we can start whittling on the debt. And we can have this debt paid off. I think they had it something like 20 to 30 years, something like that. Paid off. But we got to live within a budget and start paying down on the debt. Of all these suggestions, and they covered the complete waterfront, how many suggestions did President Obama accept? Not one. That is how important a commission is. It doesn't mean a damn thing, to quote using that word from Patton. Nothing. It is a waste of money, a time, and false hopes, and that's the reality. They're useless. Everyone is useless, and it's been that way since the beginning of politics. Well, so here we are. So then I said, and as far as I'm concerned, the only thing I'd even about that I think that probably the Senate would probably suggest, if there's a compromise, which I hope there isn't, that they honor just compensation for the removal of private property for the public good, as the Constitution stipulates. Number 2, they recognize the small sign companies, and here's how they do it. The states that comply first with the federal mandate on a state level, right in order, who's first, who's second, who's third, right on down the line, they get the money until they run out. Then you have to give more money. And they take the signs, sign company by sign company, within those respective states, not sign by sign, but sign company by sign company. Then I kind of resold him on that process. But I hope it never happens. And I knew dang well he bought it. Hook, line, and sinker. I outfoxed him. But anyway, so I got down. Now we're in December. I never did talk personally to Howard Baker Jr. Keep me away from him. I would be, have you been polluted by this Doug Snarr? I didn't want him to have to answer that question. Of course not. His chief of staff suggested how a compromise could be reached. So what happened was that what I would do is I'd come to work, which means I'd go up to my little office in Senator Moss's office complex. He had a little tiny corner for me, my little phone, my little chair, and a nice desk. And there would be some books in that stack that they were using for their work, but I'd have sufficient space that I could operate from. And it was kind of known, battered around, that I had been given the privilege by Senator Moss, which helped me immensely because the Democrats were in control and Moss was the whip. In other words, you got the ranking minority leader, and underneath him was the whip. Well, that's the position that Moss held in the Senate Democrat Party. And his job was to keep the senators all in line to vote the way that the so-called majority leader wanted. I couldn't have a better guy. I think I've mentioned this before. There's two kinds of senators. There's the show horses, and then there's the workhorses. And Moss was the workhorse. That's why he held that position. He got the job done. He could work. Well, what Woolsey was both. He was a show horse plus he was a workhorse. But if I had to choose between the two, I'd say that he was more of a workhorse. Well, on December 6th, 1970, I get a phone call. I'm sitting at my desk in Moss's office complex. And Dick Sullivan of the House Public Works Committee, General Counsel, called me and said, "We have reached a compromise," and repeated back to me exactly what I had told Howard Baker Jr.'s Chief of Staff. And there's one change that in the money end of it, instead of it being $150 million to start off with, it would drop to $100 million. That's a far cry from what originally Moss and I talked about. I think it was 10 or 15 million, I can't remember exactly, to go up to $100 million. So all I know is when he says, Doug, he said to me, "You've been honored in all of our conversations, all these months. No one has ever spoken bad about you, not one person. You've been honored. And I think I know you as well as anyone, more than anyone in that conference." And I just broke out and cried. Couldn't help it. He says, "You'll be taken care of. Money will be sent to Utah. That'll get things going." And I expressed my deepest gratitude to him. And told him I was sorry that I got a little bit rambunctious with him when he asked me to go home because there's no way I could win. And I really went after him, which I've already mentioned on an earlier disc. And how do you express it? after all these years, I added it up, and basically what it amounted to was this. It was 6 years in Washington, D.C., and it took me 4 years with the states yet to do. It was a 10-year span on the project. But we're talking the 6th year. When I went back to her apartment, told Carol, I think we can maybe get back to Salt Lake before Christmas. That's my goal. Now, I had bought, and shown over there's a little statue over there. It's a warrior. It was in an antique store. When I'd be walking from Capitol Hill, I'd go down Independence Avenue, and right on the edge was a little antique store. Been there for years. High quality stuff, good stuff. And I saw that in the window, and I went in. This was probably 2 to 3 years prior to the good news from Dick Sullivan. I want to buy this. I don't have the money, but I can pay you $10 a month. Well, that's expensive piece. And will you put it on layaway at $10 a month? I can put $10 down. And if I don't pay off, you can keep the money. And I said to myself, I'll only be able to buy that if I win. So that was one of the first things I went and picked up. Now, I didn't have all the money, any money right then, in terms of all of a sudden a flush of money, but I had enough that I could pay that off. And I knew because what had happened, I could call the bank and just said, just stick the money in my account, and they would do it. But then there's a chair over there. Beautiful, beautiful armchair. And that was in the finest furniture store at that time downtown Washington, D.C. And it reminded me of Carol's father, my father-in-law. And I'd gone in there, about at least 2 years before. I said, I want to buy this chair. I don't have any money, but I want to pay on it so much a month. The same story. If what I'm working on goes through Congress, I'll be able to pay for it. If it doesn't, I won't be able to. You can keep the money. And I can't recall what those monthly payments were, but I think they're about the same, somewhere in that neighborhood. Now, in order to get that chair back, I went to the U-Haul company. We had my Chevrolet Suburban, and there was in the back of it, well, you could hook into it, a tow situation. And I rented a U-Haul trailer and went and picked up that chair over there. And we hauled that across the country. Well, then the process became to go to each one of the people that were really instrumental in me getting this bill passed the best I could. The list was quite long, but I just felt like that I had to personally sit in front of them and thank them. I remember going to the head of the Dick Sullivan was the general counsel for the House Public Works Committee. I wanted to go to the head counsel for the Democrat side of the Public Works Committee. And he was really just, Doug, I've never seen the likes of what you've done. There's two things I remember. These expensive lobbyists come in here, Ford Motor Company, and he rattled off a bunch of names. They're lazy as hell. And he said, they would lean on us and everything else. You didn't do that. You came in and gave us language. Here, insert this in the bill. I had the language written what I wanted in that Senate bill, right to the comma on the periods. There it is. And basically that's what went in. And he said, "You've forgotten more how to work than these guys know." And he said, "But you know how this government works, really?" He said, "It really is a bunch of cogs and everything that are loosely fitted. They're not tightly fitted. They're loosely fitted. Therefore, there's give and take. And it allows for somebody like you to come. But when you started, because I remember when I first met you, you didn't know anything. By the time this bill is passed and everything, you are a pro. You're better than about any lobbyist I've ever talked to. You are. It's loosely fitted. So a guy like you can get in the cracks, and you can wiggle and work your way through to victory. And I've done enough studying politics in other nations and how they work. They're all tight. But our system is loose. And it also means that there's going to be mistakes made because of that. But also, there's space there for a Doug Snarr. He can fit into these cracks and get what he's after accomplished, provided he sticks with it long enough. And you stuck with it long enough, and you brought all the powers together. And you won, Doug. You won. You get everything you wanted. You got all that you're ever going to need. Congratulations. I think I'll stop there.